Welcome today to the 2020 Minnesota TZD webinar series. Last Thursday, we engaged with the topic of making a difference with teen safety programs in the United States. Today, we'll be covering philosophy isn't just for academics, applying Stoicism to the EMS response and traffic safety planning. My name is Mark Kindy. I'm one of Minnesota's three TZ co-chairs and the program manager for the Injury and Violence Prevention section at the Minnesota Department of Health. We want to start by thanking our hosts, including the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the Minnesota Department of Health, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, and the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Let's go to my, thank you so much for the feedback on the slides. We'll get those fixed here in just a moment as we navigate the technology. So thank you for that. Just a few moments in thinking about our topic for today. So when we think about Stoicism, often we've gone to the second or third definitions, and we've thought about what it is to be a Stoic. And that has to do with being impassive or being indifferent to pleasure or to pain. But today, let's hang in together as our speaker unleashes and opens up an alternative perspective, one that helps us identify causes and speaks hope into possible solutions. Now, epidemiology is a science that lets us ask why. It allows us to pursue how and when as well, but it pushes us to dig deeper, to looking into why a certain disease or injury happens. What might have been done to protect or to prevent such a thing from happening in the first place? Were there underlying conditions or social determinants of health that contributed or that increased risk or decreased protective factors? Our goal is to prevent crashes from occurring, but if and when they do happen, we want a trauma system that's timely, that knows how to treat, how to triage, and how to transfer the patient, and that gets us back to community and family as quickly as possible. Now, before we start the official webinar topic, the TZD program is very pleased to recognize our 2020 TZD EMS Star Award recipient, Joni Soames. Joni serves as one of three co-chairs of the Dakota County TZD Coalition and leads the subcommittee that is working to increase awareness of how aging affects driving and looking at approaches to keeping older drivers independent while maintaining safe roads. Through a grant awarded to the Minnesota Emergency Nurses Association, Joni used a driver orientation screen for cognitive impairment as the foundation to develop a webinar-based law enforcement awareness and training program. This post-accredited training includes information about how the ability to drive is affected with age, looking at clues that indicate potential risk of unsafe driving and actions to take when there's a concern. In addition, Joan's participation with the Coalition's Fatality Review Committee provides an important perspective on senior driver safety. Joan continues to work to expand senior driving awareness and education program opportunities to groups such as the emergency nurses, physicians organizations, and EMS. It's just a great honor, Joni, to present this award to you, and we'd love to have you say a few words.
Well, Mark, thank you so very much for introducing me. You pretty well put every word that I would have said related to what I'm doing on the screen already for everyone. So all I can really do at this point is number one, say thanks, number one, for the nomination, and number two, for all of the help that I've gotten from so many various different people. Our law enforcement liaisons, Frank, Bill, Becky, and Scott, have really helped me to get the word out to our law enforcement. Monica and Linda, my TZD co-chairs, have helped me to expand what we're doing here in Dakota County. Gordy at DPS has really kept me on task with the grants, and he's probably tired of hearing about me or from me today, as I've been trying to get my grant summary in for this last year. And then Lisa over at the Minnesota Safety Council. We've had a really good time getting the word out there how, as we age, our physical and cognitive skills related to driving can change. And we don't just want to do what a lot of people are hearing called the DOSI screen, but we really want to look at not only cognitive impairment, but also physical impairment. And as the word gets out there, hopefully we can help our older drivers, or I like to use the word now, aging drivers, drive more safely and still maintain their mobility. And for the rest of us to be able to recognize when some of these folks maybe should start thinking about retiring from driving, and helping them to be safe and helping the rest of us be safe on the road as well. So once again, I want to thank you so much for this award. It's been a interesting passion. Every so often I wonder if what I'm doing is talking about myself, but ultimately this is a great honor, and I want to thank you all so very much.
Right. Joni, thank you. Thanks a lot. And again, congratulations to you. Really appreciate that. Now, today, our moderator is just, again, another important lady in the state of Minnesota. Our moderator today, the passion of our moderator is translating prevention into practice. Julie Philbrook with Hennepin Healthcare is today's moderator. And Julie, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, so we're just going to get a few housekeeping things out of the way. Again, I want to welcome you to the webinar. The philosophy isn't just for academics, applying Stoicism to EMS response and traffic safety planning. Before we introduce our speaker, I just want to remind you that the webinar will be recorded, is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be on TZD website as well as the slides. We would like to encourage you to participate with questions and answers. We will probably hold those till the end unless there's something that comes up that I'll bring up to Ross, but we'll probably hold them till the end. But be sure to use the Q&A box, please, and not the chat box, so that I'm able to see all of your questions. All right. And then the TZD webinar series is proud to offer continuing education credits. These listed credits are available for this webinar, as you can see on the slide. To find the forms, please go to the Philosophy Isn't Just for Academics webpage. Okay, and then for law enforcement viewers, post-board credits are also available for this webinar. Please read this important announcement from the post-board. If you are watching this webinar live, please watch the webinar in its entirety, and TZD will submit the affidavit of attendance report to the post-board for you. If you are watching a recorded version of the webinar, please complete the affidavit of attendance on the TZD website and email it to tzd@umn.edu. Instructions are on the website if you need more details. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, is Ross A. Chavez. Ross is a 911 paramedic with the City of Woodbury's Public Safety Department. He has worked in healthcare and EMS since 2001. He holds a BA in Latin American Studies and completed his paramedic training in Chicago, Illinois, while working as a community health organizer. Ross's EMS career has largely been focused on urban EMS with roles spanning from front lines to leadership, as well as outreach, marketing, and business development. He is focused on the topic of health and human performance and how they apply to public safety workforce. Ross resides in the Twin Cities with his wife and 3 young children and enjoys reading and getting outdoors to camp, backpack, climb, and bike. So at this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Ross. We look forward to hearing from you.
Hey, thank you, Julie. And thank you everyone for joining in today. Let me share my screen here to get this started. All right. All right, I think this should be working for everybody. First off, it is an absolute honor and privilege to be here with everybody, and to be presenting to all of you. And I thank all of you for joining in today. Like Julie said, my name is Ross Chavez, and today together, we're going to explore how EMS responds to incidents on our highways. But this is probably going to be just a little bit different from the typical case study presentations that you've seen before. I'm going to do my best to include all the aspects of TZD, the education, EMS, enforcement, and engineering. I'm also going to try and provide an additional lens to see this through. And that's this lens of Stoic philosophy that Mark hinted at. And Mark was right. There is an aspect to what he said, and we'll cover that. But first, let's get warmed up. Actually, literally, this weather that we've had so far this October it's kind of crazy. So let's see if we can advance. All right. So first, before we dig in, I want to try something, and I need all of you to help me out here. I want you to find something to write or type a word on, whatever works. And I want you to think of a word, one word that describes how you've been feeling since the onset of the challenges, the events, the situations that 2020 has dealt us. We'll give you about 30 seconds or so. I want you to be honest. I want you to think of one word and record it somewhere. I'm going to pause because I don't want the content of the presentation, what I'm going to present here, I don't want it to bias your initial feelings. So go ahead and write it down somewhere, and we're going to get to it later on in the presentation. My apologies if you guys hear my dog in the background. He's wanting to join me. All right. So now we've done that, let's go through the disclosures. I'm going to kind of speed through some of this stuff because I know that I've got way more content than what I have time for. So like Julie said, I am a paramedic for the City of Woodbury Public Safety. I also work part-time for Zoll Data. The opinions that I'm expressing here are my own and don't reflect my employer. And I do not have any financial conflicts of interest to disclose. So a little bit more about me. I think that I used to live to work, but I've learned and I'm getting better at working to live. And so while I'm extremely passionate about my professional life, I'm even more passionate about the activities and the people in my life that bring me the greatest joy. And that's backpacking in the Canadian Rockies with my family and my friends. And I'm not a religious person, but if I were, you could probably call this my church. This is Mount Robson in Robson Provincial Park. And these are the places where I feel grounded. This is where I can easily access that peace and the stillness in my mind and in my body. Even if one of the kids maybe just peed in the sleeping bag, I'm still able to do that. My other love, let's see here, it's coffee. And I look for the freshest whole beans. I grind them by hand. I think the best cup is made by pour over. And I do weigh my beans and I weigh my water to the nearest gram. So if any of you have any great suggestion on fresh beans, send them to me. I'd be happy to try them out. I'm always looking for a good cup of coffee. So I tell you this because I think that this will play into the webinar a little bit, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see what kind of questions come up. I've told Julie to interrupt me if some good questions come up, and if we don't make it to the end of all the slides, we don't make it to the end. So first, let's go back to this first activity that we did. We'll revisit that word at the end of the lecture, but I wanted to recognize that it's been a hell of a year. And I don't think any of us have been immune, and there's no pun intended there, to what's been going on. If any of you have heard me speak in the past, you know that I've included our well-being into many of my topics. A big part of what's provided me perspective through the difficulties that we encounter in our public safety professions is Stoicism. But it really goes beyond the philosophy's application to our work life, and it's been extremely valuable to me in my personal life, especially this year. I won't get political, and I definitely respect that many of us may have various opinions on this obnoxious little ball of viral RNA. But this iconic picture of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 covered with the spike proteins has really come to represent 2020 in a single picture. And the fact is that millions, if not tens, but hundreds of millions of people around the world have or are suffering due to the direct and indirect effects of this virus. There's not much this virus hasn't impacted, and it's kind of the perfect backdrop for this webinar. I do want to express my solidarity with those of you who may have been deeply impacted or will be deeply impacted by the daily challenges and beyond that we've all experienced with COVID-19. So I hope that you all get out of this talk a curiosity for Stoicism, if not a rudimentary understanding of it and how you might apply it to your work and maybe personal life. We'll discuss some high-level emergency response planning and tactics through a virtual hypothetical scenario, and we'll discuss the principles of ICS and managing a highway MCI. Finally, I hope that you'll be able to describe some of the strategies for collaboration between the 4 E's of TCD in order to provide or improve, I should say, response readiness to challenging traffic incidents, and view all of this through the lens of Stoicism. All right, Stoicism. For those of you who may not be familiar with Stoic philosophy, Stoicism has its roots in the ancient Phoenician merchant turned philosopher named Zeno, who around 304 BC founded a school of philosophy that was to become Stoicism. And to keep things simple, you can think of this philosophy as having 4 virtues, and I'll provide some examples in the upcoming slides. First, courage, meaning what sort of impression you will leave when confronted with challenges. What will your record show for your capability? Temperance, and this is to really refer to moderation in life, or finding the right balance. But more importantly, this applies to the development of habits and systems and processes in order to achieve results. Justice. I think this one this one is the simplest of them all, and it really boils down to do the right thing. Now, that may not be the same for everyone. If you're interested in the double-edged sword of moral obligation, I highly recommend a podcast called Hidden Brain. Their latest episode was called Moral Combat. It was broadcast on October 19th, just last week. And it kind of has to do with our moral certainty sometimes can produce moral blinders on us. But we'll go back to justice in a little bit. Wisdom. And I think that many of us are in careers where we've adopted the mantra that you become a danger to yourself and others if you either think you know everything or you just stop learning. Always learn and know what you need to learn. Filter out the noise, because these days it's no secret that we're inundated with information and distractions, little of which is good. Zeno, he said that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I might suggest that we might try closing one eye, given all the screen-based media that we consume. Something else to consider is how your knowledge changes over time. The question to ask is, do you leave room to allow for new facts and information to change your beliefs on certain things? And I mean, think of how we've changed our views and practices in traffic safety and injury prevention. Think about car seats and seatbelts and speed limits and roundabouts, distracted driving, all of those things, even how CPR resuscitation has changed in EMS over the past decade alone. Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher, he said, "You cannot learn that which you think you already know." So in addition to the 4 virtues, there are 7 ancient tenets to Stoicism that are important to keep in mind. So we won't spend too much time on these, but the first is memento mori, which is really means a symbol of death. And it's a reminder of our mortality to remind us that each day might be our last and that we all must die. So we should treat each day as such. Amor fati, which is Latin for love of fate. And this means that, you know, we feel grateful or even love what happens to us, no matter if it's good or bad, because we can't go back and change what's happened to us already. It's much easier for us to see our fate as exactly what we've desired. And Epictetus, once again, to quote him, said, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well." Premeditatio malorum, which means the premeditation of evils. And this tells us to prepare ourselves mentally for the curveballs that inevitably will be thrown at us by life and to be resilient. Good fortune and happiness, it's never guaranteed. I think we've all seen that, and bad fortune is never always guaranteed as well. It waxes and wanes. And the better that we can prepare for what inevitably will or won't happen, the better equipped that we will be to handle any of those setbacks. Some Stoics, they even practice hardship so that when hardship did hit, they'd already know how to live with it. They'd already have experience with it. Sympathia, or sympathy, which really means harmony or an affinity between things, where whatever affects one similarly affects the other. And for Stoicism, it encouraged us to take the 10,000-foot view hold on a second. I wonder when my video stopped. I just noticed that my video stopped. The host stopped it. Okay. To take the 10,000-foot view and really look at how things are interrelated, to look at the big picture. Often this will allow us to see how silly some of our divisive tendencies are. Everyone is interdependent on each other. As stated by Marcus Aurelius, what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. Oops, sorry about that. All right. Summum bonum, which originates from the great orator Cicero, means the highest good. And for the Stoics, it meant living a virtuous life. Courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. Seeking a virtuous life is advised, because then everything else will fall into place much more easily. The obstacle is the way. I love this tenet because it's not only is it the title of one of Ryan Holiday's books on Stoicism, but because it always moves me to find the silver lining in everything. And if you think about it, there's always a way to turn a negative into a positive. And this is a great exercise in controlling one of the only things that is always in our control, our minds and how we respond to adversity or success for that matter. Again, to quote Marcus Aurelius, he said that for the mind adapts and converts any obstacle to its action into a means of achieving it. And finally, ego is the enemy. Stoicism addresses the toxicity of ego, and I'm sure that we've all seen it. Many of us have battled it ourselves, myself included, and it's what prevents us from being vulnerable, from learning what we think we already know, from growing, from cultivating meaningful and productive relationships. Ego really is always waiting around each corner. So to talk quickly about the virtues, to talk quickly about the virtues, I just want to illustrate the 4 virtues with a few quotes that I've found particularly meaningful, and some of you might be familiar with some of these. The first one pertains to courage, and is thanks to President Theodore Roosevelt during his Citizenship in a Republic speech that was given in Paris, France, after he left office. The specific excerpt of his speech is commonly called "The Man in the Arena." So let's take a minute to review it. And if you should choose, try and close your eyes and imagine the words I'm about to read, and see if you can see yourself in these words. The quote goes, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actively strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms and the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." And this really embodies courage and speaks of those who really don't have a record to be judged by because they haven't had the courage to tame the obstacles in their paths. I think that all of you here have been in that arena. You've known high achievement and you've probably known failure. But I think that who we are here in the arena of public safety, I think we're courageous by nature, and we know enough to respect those who have had the courage to face challenges unfamiliar to us and not be the critic without a record. This, I think, is courage. It's to dare greatly. The virtue of temperance, I seem to always find a way to sneak this quote into many of my conversations because it is so relevant to much of what we do. And the Navy SEALs use a similar quote. Under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. But that quote is really traced back to the ancient Greek poet Archilochus. And as it pertains to temperance, I think of it from the perspective of developing good habits, good operating systems, and roadmaps to help keep us on the path of virtue. In our case, ensuring that our plans and strategies don't miss critical steps when we're faced with crisis, and emotions don't cloud our rational decision making when we're kind of in that cloud of war, or I should say fog of war. Justice, again, I purposely didn't write anything on this slide because I think justice should be self-evident to all of us. While Stoicism tells us to focus on what is within our realm of control and focus on how we react to what we don't control, the virtue of justice still calls on us to fight for what is right, to not accept injustices that exist, and to focus the virtue of justice so that it may drive the other three virtues. And this, I think, is integrity. It's doing the right thing always. Epictetus's quote here, what is it then to be properly educated? It is learning to apply our natural preconceptions to the right things according to nature, and beyond that, to separate the things that lie within our power from those that don't. So last but certainly not least is wisdom. And like I said previously, Stoicism emphasizes the importance of possessing the wisdom to know what we do and don't control. And some of us may be familiar with this concept as commonly seen in Serenity Prayer. And I think that all these things we come across in our jobs that we really don't control, from something as simple as, getting burned with a call at the end of your shift and not getting off on time, to what's the popular reaction to new or radical safety regulations that are put into place. It's kind of funny, Mike Tyson famously pointed out that plans, they only last until you're punched in the face, and then everything seems to change or throw you off. Our wisdom combined with courage and temperance will allow us to be adaptable, and when we do get punched in the face, that'll inevitably happen. And as said by Epictetus, in this way, you must understand how laughable it is to say, "Tell me what to do. What advice could I possibly give?" Nope. A far better request is, train my mind to adapt to any circumstance. In this way, if circumstances take you off script, you won't be desperate for a new prompting. And that's from Discourses, one of highlighting some of Epictetus's teachings. So what does that mean? Don't waste your time or your energy on what you can't control. Rather, master all that you do control. All right. So a lot of you are probably wondering, what the heck does any of this have to do with EMS traffic incident response, or the 4 E's of TZV? Just bear with me for a minute. I think the connection that you're looking for, I think it's coming up. And if I fail you in making that connection, at least hopefully you've learned a good bit about Stoic philosophy, or the foundation, and maybe you're motivated to learn more and apply it to your personal and professional life. Maybe you're nodding off. Maybe you're checking your email right now, or scrolling the social media on your phone, or doom scrolling. Whatever the case is, we're transitioning. And as we transitioned from summer directly to winter, if that weren't drastic enough, I hope some of you tried this. I'm making it obvious here that we're moving to a new section of the talk. So let's move to a bad morning. Have you ever awakened on a slow weekend morning and heard an odd noise coming from the street to be confronted with something like this? I can't personally say that I've been awakened by it, but I do remember one time as a kid doing this after one memorable ice storm. And I remember the recent ice storm that generated this photo. So this is setting the scene of your scenario. I just wanted to give you a good visual of kind of what you're waking up to when when you went to sleep at the station, or at home if you're responding from home. There was no freezing rain, and it wasn't in the forecast. When you wake up for this call that's coming up in the morning, this is what you see. So this hypothetical scenario, it's 6:30 in the morning on a weekend, and your station is dispatched early on this morning, and it's in the midst of an unexpected but brief and severe ice event. And not to want to miss out on any of the fun, all of the other agencies in your area, they're also being dispatched to the growing number of motor vehicle crashes and vehicles off the roadways and vehicle spinouts that are coming in at a fast and furious pace. And so it seems that you and your partners have drawn the winning lottery ticket, and you guys received the call for the crash that involved 2 semis and an SUV on your local high volume roadway. So it's not like situations like this are unfamiliar to us here in Minnesota, right? Or North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. But they do present many challenges and dangers, especially when we consider the high likelihood of mass casualty events on any of our area roads, and some are more prone to it than others, especially when the weather conditions deteriorate. So this brings me to the first poll question. I want to kind of gauge what this is for you. A mass casualty event, it can mean an event that quickly exceeds the resources, the capabilities of local emergency services. So for your agency or your geographic area of service, what would an MCI be for you on an average day? And think about at what point your resources would be quickly overwhelmed, all right? Is it more than 2 severe to critical patients, 5 or more, 8 or more, 10 or more? Maybe none of the above. Go ahead and put your responses in there. All right. So for most of you, it looks like more than 2 severe to critical, 27%, 5 or more patients. Okay, so we kind of run the gamut there. So keep that in mind. I mean, for some folks who are out in a rural area with very limited resources, it doesn't take a whole lot to create an MCI. Versus a large urban area with a lot of resources, they can throw many resources very quickly. There's a lot of hospitals to handle that. Very interesting. Let's see, get back to my slide. All right, so let's talk about response planning. As this call comes in, thinking about the crash that we're dispatched to with multiple patients during an ice event, there's some things that we should probably consider during the response phase of the incident. So let's think about staffing. How many people or resources do you have on hand in various capacities? How many law enforcement personnel will likely respond, and what will their bandwidth be to help us out with patient care or scene control? Are they being dispersed to other incidents that are happening due to the storm? Are you getting a fire response as well? Do they come out of the same station that you are, or is it a different service? How many hands are there going to be available to help you out on scene? Is it staffed with a duty crew or a full-time crew, or is it paid on call? Are people coming in from home, and how long is it going to take them to get in from home in order to get on scene? As far as apparatus go, what kind of apparatus will be responding? I know that there's some agencies now who are utilizing smaller ambulances that make transport of multiple patients very difficult, if not impossible sometimes. So do you have enough space for the estimated number of patients, or do you need more resources? And what about pediatric patients and their special needs? Do you have enough equipment? Do you have the means to secure them inside of your vehicle? Will you have enough apparatus to box you in and protect the scene, or provide adequate warning for traffic? Are the right tools and the right equipment being brought to the scene? These are all important questions to ask as we're responding to this call. And for communications, how do you guys receive your information prior to arriving on the scene? Once you're on the scene, do you have a communications plan? Agencies or jurisdictions, can they all speak to each other on the same radio channel? Are you all speaking the same language of ICS, or do some agencies use 10 codes or other agency specific lingo that maybe another agency isn't familiar with? And as far as expectations, it's important that everyone has the same approximate expectations for what's going to happen on scene. Who's going to be in command, and how would the command transfer happen when that's needed? Where is everybody going to set up, and how long do you anticipate you're going to be on scene? So let's try to apply the Stoic lens here and think about what is and what isn't in our control as we prepare to respond. So knowledge or wisdom, I think we definitely have the opportunity to think about where we should focus our efforts. It does nobody any good to become upset over how others are driving in these conditions, like I know we commonly do, or the limited information you have to work off of based on what dispatch may or may not be able to relay to you. Your ability to not permit the clutter, so to speak, to interfere with your duty is essential, especially now when the stakes are high and when people might be amped up. As far as reaction goes, this is a very related to wisdom. You control your reactions. You control how calm you are in the chaos. I like to repeat this mantra: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Be aware of how you're reaching, or how you're, I should say, reacting to input that's going at you, how you're reacting to the actions of your colleagues. Maybe someone is not moving fast enough for you, or not following the plan, whatever that plan may be, or maybe they're moving too fast and they're being careless and making mistakes. How do you react so that you can all fulfill your duty to respond safely? Remember, we're all interconnected. Step away, take that 10,000-foot view. For readiness and mental preparation, were you on call already and ready to respond? Were you at the station and was all your gear ready to go? I think this is one of the challenges that many of us in emergency response face, that we never know when the call is going to come in. So we're always kind of subconsciously tense and at alert. But what can we do to ensure that we are prepared? Do you have a system in place for when you respond? Are you getting enough sleep? What checklists or job aids do you run through in your mind when calls come in, if any? Do you have a routine? As far as the environmental factors, there's not a whole lot that we can control. A lot of it is outside our control, but we can control how we conduct ourselves in these environments, from poorly lit roads and scenes to unexpected inclement weather. Our actions change and we adjust. And we adapt and we apply skills and knowledge. And hopefully it's not that punch in the face that disorients us. And the reactions of others. I mentioned this already, and we really don't control that, but we do control how we react. We're all interconnected. We're a team. We depend on one another. So what sorts of behaviors can support that? Do you have a culture where you work that supports open communication? Does everyone feel that they can speak up when they see something? And will everyone respect constructive feedback or be open to change given new information that comes in? Whatever the case may be, we have a job to do and we need to act accordingly. And Murphy's Law, keep that in mind because it's always there. Have you practiced or have you guys trained with Murphy's Law? Remember the tenet of premeditation. Did you or have you and your team taken advantage of, downtime and training time to practice being at a disadvantage or something not going quite right before having to face it on a difficult call? The fog of war, it's no time to be making plans for things that you're just not prepared for. All right, so back to the scenario. It took us a while to get to the scene by a factor of like 3x. So the roads are bad. Law enforcement gets there first, and they advise that there's 6 patients, including children. EMS and fire arrive together and observe 2 semis about 75 yards apart. They're on the road and an SUV. There's no entrapments, and the damage appears to be non-severe. So just imagine that this is kind of maybe what the scene would look like, except that it's dark, but there are multiple lanes. There's a lot of ice, and traffic is still moving. Fortunately, it doesn't look like this, but that's not out of the question. That could happen, right? All right, so we're on scene. Again, what are we thinking? Well, blocking. Are you guys able to create a safe scene? Are there enough apparatus to box you in, or are you able to get positioned as safely as possible to prevent a vehicle from entering your safe zone? I'm not sure what everybody does and what your protocols are, but you want to create that safe zone so that a vehicle doesn't come into your area of work. Assist devices. What else do you guys have in your repertoire of tools to create a safe zone? Do you put cones out? Where do you put them? What's the national standard? Are your vehicles equipped with directional lights to direct traffic? Do your emergency lights dim so as not to blind other drivers who are approaching the scene? As far as PPE goes, I really hope that we're all wearing high-vis coats or vests. These days, I think that should probably be second nature, just as putting gloves on, and hopefully with this pandemic, putting masks and eye protection on is second nature as well moving forward. As far as routes in and out, we want to think about those things as well. These are the initial stages of setting up incident command and digging into the incident command structure. So if you need additional resources, how would you expect them to arrive and depart? Is there a best route in and out? And where might you stage additional resources for a quick response if you needed them? You probably don't want to put a bunch of resources right on an icy freeway and have them contribute to the hazards. Scene lighting, again, how are you ensuring that you can see and that others can see you? And then let's briefly look through this with the Stoicism lens again. And I'm not going to go over this again because, but not everything that we talked about and during the response phase applies here as well. Let's see here. Let's talk about, what can you control and what can't you control? Has your learning, has your wisdom, your training, your habits and systems, they allowed you to maintain some calm? Are you adaptable to as new information is fed to you? And have you checked your ego at the door? Are you sticking to the plan and not allowing emotion to throw or cut you off? Where's the silver lining? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Where's the silver lining and the positivity in the curveballs that are being thrown at you right now? It might not be apparent right now, but file it away for later. And remember that, Murphy, they're still around the corner waiting for you. So we are talking about high level about managing these difficult traffic incidents because they're dangerous for all who are involved, but especially us as responders. Last year, we had 44 emergency responders working various types of roadway incidents were struck and killed. This per the Emergency Responder Safety Institute. And you can see that law enforcement led that group. And then this year through October 17th, 18 emergency responders working various types of roadway incidents were struck and killed. Again, law enforcement leading that group. So folks, we've made a lot of great advances in safety when it comes to these types of incidents. Shoulders are wider, road signage is improved, visibility, PPE is standard, and science continues to improve it. And best practices have been established and are constantly updated, but we're still being killed out there. And sometimes these deaths are preventable. Maybe lanes weren't properly blocked. Maybe someone walked outside of the safe into open traffic. Something about me, I also like to rock climb, and I'm hyper aware that, most of the mistakes happen in one of two situations. Is when we get summit fever, we just throw good judgment out the window because we want that rush of reaching the summit, or it's on the way back down. We let our guard down on the descent, and that is the most dangerous portion of climbs because that's when careless mistakes are made. And so I've been telling you that there's a lot we don't control, and despite our best efforts, death may be in the cards that we are dealt that day, whether we follow every protocol and procedure or not. But why wouldn't we want to reduce our chances and do what we can to prevent a bad outcome like that? And so this comes down to habits. I've previously said that temperance is what can lead us to the development of good habits. And Musonius Rufus, who was actually the teacher of Epictetus, he has something to say about habits in his teachings, documented by his students. And they said of him, when the problem arose for us whether habit or theory was better for getting virtue, if by theory is meant what teaches us correct conduct, and by habit we mean being accustomed to act according to this theory, Musonius thought habit to be more effective. And what I'm getting at here is that we can talk about what we should do and best practices, but it's the experience that counts. It's the courage, the person in the arena. We should all have experience in the arena. And how do we get there? How do we ensure that we've developed habits and systems and protocols that follow the best theories? It's training, right? It's training and it's retraining when new information or new evidence becomes available. You know, I'm not an expert on traffic incident management. I'm not an expert in ICS. I'm not an instructor. I'm here to share my ideas and hopefully get you all thinking about this in a new light and create some excitement and or an impetus to act on what you hear today. At least I think that's what TZD was hoping that I would do and why they invited me to speak. And hopefully they're not thinking, oh my gosh, this guy just went rogue. But I do want to point you here to find some training resources. And I happened upon this after listening to a webinar featuring Jack Sullivan, who is, many of you probably know, a roadway safety expert and the director of training for the Emergency Responder Safety Institute. These are free courses, so why not take them? And I strongly believe that the deeper your pool of knowledge and the pool of knowledge of your agency, the more effective that you will be as an agency. This is but one resource, and I'm sure that you guys are going to be exposed to many, many more resources through this TZD webinar series this year. So take advantage of them. This is a simple quote from a really stupid movie. And I'm actually rethinking this quote a little bit when examined through the lens of Stoicism. Recall what Mike Tyson said about plans. They're great until you get punched in the face, right? So while plans are essential, and they provide a consistent framework for what we do, there needs to be room for being adaptable. And they can't depend on being told what to do each step of the way, because sometimes those steps, they won't make any sense. In your experience in the arena or courage, it's important here. And that has to be tempered by moderation and keeping your ego in check. Helicopters aren't flying for this scenario. So for those of you who depend on helicopters, that's not an option. As far as resource demand, I've used this graphic before. It just briefly, it highlights that the red line is what you're seeing as demanding for resources, and it spikes immediately. And there's no way to have all of the resources there right away. And so what our job is to kind of evaluate that and figure out what do we think we're going to need and how quickly can we get it there so that we can try and close that gap between the red and the blue line. The blue line, what actual resources you have recruited. And it's much easier to call off resources than to have to call them up when you need them, when you realize you need them. Because for those of you who live in areas where you're counting on resources coming from the next town over, or the next county over, that time could be really critical. So there is something to help us do this more consistently, and they are checklists. In the fog of war, during intense and difficult calls, when you're being pulled in several different directions and monitoring radio traffic and one channel, you got to do some cognitive offloading. And as stress, fatigue, and complexity increases, our ability to maintain good and efficient cognitive function, it really does decrease. So we can use these checklists as a tool in certain situations to help reduce the risk of mistakes and reduce the costs of mistakes, improve outcomes, and improve the delivery of our services. There are barriers and there are risks to implementing checklists, however. We can't just make a checklist for a perceived problem and expect that it's going to be fixed and everyone to follow it. but they are pretty impactful, even though they aren't the holy grail or silver bullet for all things. This is just a study illustrating how checklists implemented in the healthcare world, in the operating room to be specific, significantly decreased death rates in different ORs across the world, as well as a significant reduction in complication rates. And, you know, it should be no surprise. I mean, the aviation industry has been using checklists since the 1930s, and this study demonstrated that they're also applicable to healthcare. And Dr. Atul Gawande, he is responsible for much of the work done to introduce checklists into healthcare. And I'm not going to dive deep into this, but I do recommend his book, The Checklist Manifesto, and it outlines kind of the critical elements for success highlighted here, as well as other factors that make checklists able to be implemented in your agency. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of speed through that and show you guys one of the job aids checklists that I used to use in my career here in the Metro. And this is the ICS command reference that was developed by the Metro EMS region. I'm not sure if this is the most updated version or if it's still in use, but it was a tool that I used a lot, and it applies to setting up EMS command, and it really outlines all the steps that are needed when arriving on scene, who to delegate roles to, and variables that require our attention when we're on scene. Many of us don't do ICS on a daily basis like large urban services do, so it's not as familiar to us. And while we do strive to train on this, I'm not sure this is something we can expect everyone to be fluent in when the big one hits. And as applied to school shootings, it's been difficult to get law enforcement and EMS and fire all on the same page when responding to large MCIs, because we have different cultures of operation and different jobs that we focus on. But checklists like this, they can definitely help get us on the same page if they're created the right way and implemented correctly. All right, so let's finish up our scenario here. And in the first semi, there's one adult patient who's shaken up, but seems uninjured despite the damage. In the SUV, there's 2 adults, 3 children, and 1 large but friendly dog. And as you know, and as far as you know, I should say, the other semi has no patient. And the roads are so icy that you can barely walk on them even. So there's a lot of challenges, and it's the kind of conditions where, you know, you park your vehicle and you think that it's just the right angle, it's just going to keep on sliding. So again, let's break this down and think about some things here. What do you do on scenes when there's a lot of traffic? Do you try and load up the patients quick, clean up the scene, move blockages, move to an off-ramp or a side street to complete care or continue investigative interviews? How long are you sitting out there with traffic whizzing by, even if it's going slowly? You know, the longer that we're on the highway, the more opportunities there are for something bad to happen. We've seen all those on YouTube videos. And then as we consider the dangers of remaining on the scene, the limited resources we might have, and other factors out of our control, most dealt by Mother Nature in this scenario, how does that impact the standard of care that you're providing your patient? Maybe you can't do everything you want for the patient. You just got to get them off the scene and get them to the hospital. You know, it's okay. Is it okay to put a patient in the front seat because you just don't have enough space? You don't have enough other resources. And then as far as the ED goes, maybe you rely on them to help complete some of the things that you would have otherwise completed on scene. Because when it comes down to it, you really only have so many hands and so much space in that mobile office of yours. And then where are you taking these patients during this weather event? Are you going to the closest hospital? Are you going to a trauma center? Do the hospitals know that you're coming in? Are they going to be ready? Will this be an MCI for your local hospital? And then finally, you know, who's going to be taking over the scene when you leave, or who's there to take over for you so that you can focus on your specific duties, whether that be patient care, fire operations, or whatnot. So I think that we've hammered the second part of this in previous slides, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but think about some of the difficult decisions that you might have to make and how you might have control over what goes into this part of the incident. And I want to ask another poll question here. You know, we've looked at a possible scenario where incident command would be helpful, and we've talked about courage. And thinking about this or other MCIs you may have encountered, on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you right now in your ability to initiate incident command using ICS structure and language on a difficult roadway MCI? 0 for not confident at all, never done it, to 10, extremely confident, fluent in ICS. Give you guys a little bit to answer that. All right, so most of you not confident. You've never done something like this, you know, and whether you're boots on the ground responders or it's because that you're this just isn't within your wheelhouse because of your job. But you know, it looks like also some people are, you know, kind of in the middle of the road here. So it kind of spreads the gamut. So it illustrates, you know, why we need to train on this. And I think that you know, I asked this question because these incidents can happen anywhere. At any time. They might be relatively small, but devastating for a small service. For, you know, this picture here, it might be an MCI for one service, while a large service might not see any operational impact from the resources that are demanded of an incident like this. I know that if my memory serves me correctly, there were no kids on that bus, but now there's a traffic control signal at that intersection. You know, transportation isn't isolated to our roads. We have lots of rails as well. And this incident in Castleton, North Dakota was a close call. How do you think things would have changed in this rural community had the scene been right in town? And I know that it's kind of the quintessential Minnesota example, the collapse of the 35W bridge. And it might seem cliche to keep mentioning this 12 years later, but nobody expected that bridge to fall. That was not in the plans, and it sure generated a lot of action around making plans for the future. And I like and dislike this photo for many reasons, but I'm showing it here because I think it captures what we've been talking about. Right in the middle of the photo, standing on the collapsed freeway deck, is a Hennepin EMS medic without a reflective vest. He's wearing a blue helmet, and he's standing there like he's dazed. And there's really no action detectable in this medic, while everything else around seems to be moving. That medic is me. That was me 2 months into the job, trying to figure out how the heck to set up a triage area and make sure nobody else died. That was my first arena. It was the first time that I got punched in the face. It was the first time that I had to adapt and overcome in this job. Well, you know, we used civilians to check pulses and respirations, and we used pickup trucks to move patients off the scene. My point here is that this can and will happen to you at some point in your career if it hasn't happened already. And, you know, why not use the lessons of the Stoics to increase your chances of success? I didn't have those tools at the time, and I think I would have benefited greatly. My youth was my resilience after the fact of that incident, but even my youth, that wore off. And thankfully, I have developed resilience thanks to Stoicism in recent years. So knowing that MCIs can happen anywhere at any time and likely will involve multiple agencies, does your agency participate in regular, annual, quarterly, monthly, is it on the calendar, planned training with public safety partners in your area or jurisdiction on difficult transportation emergencies and response? Yes or no? All right, see the results there. So 50%, 52% don't have regular training scheduled on the calendar with other agencies. And I think it's really important that we do that type of training. Let's see here. Go to the next slide. All right. Because like I said, these MCIs can happen anywhere, and they involve a lot of different agencies, you know, even MnDOT. So some of the key takeaways, I want to try, let's see, my mouse isn't working. All right. I want to try and tie this all together. And I know that we didn't spend a lot of time on engineering or education or enforcement, but I hope you realize that the scenario presented here, it does contain all of these elements, and my emphasis on planning, on being able to take a step back and look at what we do from a higher level to see how we are all interconnected and have a role to play before, during, and after these complex traffic incidents, so that we can improve outcomes and we can prevent unnecessary morbidity and mortality, not only for the people of Minnesota and all the visitors, but for us, for the responders as well. So premeditate evils. Complex traffic incidents and MCIs can be due to many variables, and they can occur anywhere. Temperance, have a plan and use it while leaving room for adaptability. You want to leave room for common sense and leave room for courage and wisdom, unadulterated by egos. Train, and overtrain. Each day is a gift. Use it to get better and share it with others. Use job aids and checklists for cognitive offloading. Also, I highly recommend using plain English and refraining from industry lingo. It's really easy to get people confused. Remember, we're all interconnected, so why not do better at networking with our regional partners and leverage each other's resources? What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee, but what's good for the hive is also good for the bee. So who's in your hive? And it's not just limited to your professional partners. What about the community? What about the communities we serve? How are we educating and engaging the communities to make our roads and our incident scenes safer and learn from these tragedies? And how are we engaging these communities and doing so in a just way that focuses on equity and inclusion for all people, especially those who have been historically marginalized? That gap in the state is another talk in and of itself, but I think we really have a duty to recognize that gap and strive for the highest good. And prepare yourselves for making unconventional or difficult decisions and using unconventional resources. You may need to lean on your resilience, go back to other times that you've been in the arena, or dare to be brave if this is your first time in the arena. We must leave space to be vulnerable and to learn from the decisions we make and the actions we take on these difficult scenes. And remember, there's always a positive in every negative, always. Courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. Last poll question. Go back to that word that you wrote down at the beginning. Was it a positive word or was it a negative word? Was it happy or was it sad? %65% of you had a negative word, 35% positive. So that kind of tells us, I think, the state of mind that we're in. And it's hard not to see the world through a negative lens right now. And my words, they may not change that for you, but know that there really is no better time to be alive than right now, despite the challenges we're going through. The Stoics believe that we were built for this. And they're right, because this isn't the first time as humans that we face great adversity. Social upheaval, economic uncertainty, a pandemic, it's all happened before. Our ancestors have been through it many, many times throughout history, and they persevered. Had they not, we wouldn't be here talking today. So just think about that. And if you need help, please reach out. Find a buddy that you can depend on so that they know you'll be calling them if you need a lifeline. Know the numbers. You can text HOME to 741-741 for the crisis text line. And I want to end with, this is one of my favorite quotes from Ryan Holiday's book, The Daily Stoic. And again, feel free to close your eyes and imagine yourself as I read. We understand that stepping up and helping is a service that leaders provide to the world. It's our duty to do this in big situations and small ones. If we expect to be leaders, we must see that thankless service comes with the job. We must do what leaders do because it's what leaders do. Not for the credit, not for the thanks, not for the recognition. It's our duty. We are all leaders here, whether you have an official title or not, in our jobs and in our personal lives. I will recognize all of you as leaders and thank you all for what you do. And if you're looking for additional resources, I recommend The Daily Stoic. Ryan Holiday has a website as well as the book. Tim Ferriss has a lot of great stuff, as well as Dr. Peter Attia's podcast called The Drive. You guys can delve into that. And I want to thank you all for listening today. I know we're over time, but I'm not as active as I used to be on Twitter, but that's my main social media tool. So if you want to find me there, that's where to find me. I like to end with a photo of my family because it's a reminder to me of why I do what I do and what's truly important in my life. We're all much, much more than our jobs. And while we pour our heart and our soul into our work and what we do for the community, when the work is no longer there, who are we? What is our identity? And memento mori, be the best version of yourself each and every day, but especially now. We have a social compact to uphold. I don't care who you vote for, but please make sure you have a plan to vote next week if you haven't already, and get 3 of your friends to vote too. So many have sacrificed so much to ensure that we retain this amazing right and privilege. And then speaking of social compacts, please wear your masks. All of us in healthcare out there, we're at risk with this pandemic. And a lot of our families are going to have empty seats at their tables this holiday season and mourning the loss of loved ones, or the loved ones can't be there. So please do your part, lead by example, and consider this as your first foray into Stoicism. So with that, I conclude. Maybe we have some time for a couple of questions.
Well, yeah, actually, we didn't have too many questions. I think you left people with some really things to really think about and taking things to a very deep level. And I appreciate that, especially now. I think we need to look at that. So time, we are at the end of our time. So you have Ross's contact information. Just a couple of housekeeping things here as we end up. Again, we want to thank you, Ross, for bringing in some concepts that might be really new to a lot of us. So thank you. There is a link to the evaluation, can be found in the chat box, and you will also be emailed. Please take a couple minutes to fill out the survey. The TZD leadership team does read these and uses them for planning in the future. As for social media for the conference, as we continue, we've got the Twitter as well as Facebook. So we encourage you to get on that and retweet and get some more people. We have a lot of great topics coming up, including on Thursday. We are going to be having one on safe systems, a human-centered approach to traffic safety. We really encourage you to look outside your E if this isn't something you're in. That's the purpose of this conference. And Dr. John Milton will be discussing safe systems and the comparison to the TZD program. And he's worked in traffic safety for a long time. Okay, I think that we're going to wrap up because of time, but I want to leave you with this last message and encourage you again to continue to go on. I just want to give a plug in to Linda Dolan and her team at the University of Minnesota Center for Traffic Studies. This has been a challenging thing to put on, but we really appreciate being able to TZD, even if it's remotely. So thank you all for all your efforts.